Hello YouTube. So this is going to be my PlayStation 2 video game collection video. I'll do an overview and explanation of the titles I have, and we've got quite a bit here to get over. So we'll try to cover these. I might split this into two parts if it's running long. So let's go ahead and get started. This is roughly alphabetized. At the end, it's kind of grouped by category and some by genre, and then I have some collections that are box sets that are grouped by themselves. So let's go ahead and get started. So starting here in the A's, we have Amplitude. This is a music rhythm game that was by Harmonix. So this game was basically the company that made Guitar Hero. This was an early title that they made that kind of kickstarted the music game genre. I think this is not as common as obviously the Guitar Hero games, which were huge hits. So this is kind of a quirky game. It's got some, horrible, what do we got, early 2000s things, POD, Blink-182, and some other stuff. So, if I'm offending your favorite band, sorry about that, but, this kind of is a product of its time. This game came out in 2003, so I guess it's, got some popular music of that time. It's also got some, David Bowie and some other classic things. Papa Roach, look at that. Okay, so number 2, we've got Automodelista. This is a Capcom racing game that is cel-shaded. This kind of came out after, some of the Gran Turismo games on PlayStation 2. This supported online matchmaking. If you were one of the few people that actually had a PlayStation 2 that was wired to the network, in your house. I don't think I ever played this online, maybe more than once or twice just to try it out. But I remember this having a unique art style, but not very realistic driving physics. So it's kind of an arcade racer more than anything. Next here we've got the Art of Fighting Anthology. This is a collection of some of the Neo Geo Art of Fighting games. I wish they had put more on these discs than just a handful. There's a couple other ones here I have in the collection too, but this is, it's 3 games on one disc, and, they could have probably put the entire Neo Geo catalog on one disc. We've got Battlestar Galactica. This is not based on the TV show that came out in 2003. This is based on the universe from the late 70s, I believe. So if you're looking for this to play the series that was from 2003 that was extremely popular, this is not that. This is basically just classic Battlestar Galactica in a unremarkable space sim. We've got Beatmania. This is one of the few Konami music game franchises that came here. This came with a full, keyboard with turntable, which is another box someplace else. But I remember I couldn't really get into this. We've got Bombastic. This is a quirky puzzle game. This is actually the sequel, and it's the third in the series to a game that was on PlayStation 1, which was called Devil Dice. I think in Japan it was called Zai or Chai. It was spelled Xi. It's basically like a puzzle game where you have one of these little cartoony characters. You roll around on dice and you try to make combos on the board. It's basically like an endless mode where you just keep going until you run out of moves and you die and go for a high score. Burnout 3 Takedown. This is basically one of the only arcade racers that I have. This is kind of neat. It had a neat physics engine where basically you just crash your car as, gloriously as possible and try to score points. It also has a racing mode where you're racing against other cars and you gotta force people off the road. It's kind of neat. It's the only one in the Burnout franchise that I own, however. We've got Capcom Arcade Classics. Let's see if I have Volume 1. We do. So we have Volume 1 here. This has 22 arcade classics. I don't know if you can read this. It's a mix of Street Fighter II, 1942, some other things. They made a Volume 2, which has 20 more games. It's like if you like old school Capcom, I mean, these collections are good, and they were, relatively inexpensive when they came out. Alright, we're in the C's. So we've got Castle Shikigami 2. This is a really complicated shoot 'em up, from the early 2000s, where it's like a bullet hell game where you've got a billion things going on at once. It's just kind of a neat thing to add to the collection. There's lots and lots of late PlayStation 2 games that were kind of real quirky, niche titles that came out, and this is definitely one of them. We've got Contra Shattered Soldier. This is from 2000. What year is it? It doesn't say on the back of the box, but it's from the early 2000s. There was 2 Contra games on PlayStation 2. This is the first of the 2. I don't know if any of these were actually done in-house at Capcom, or if they were third-party developers that basically Capcom slapped their name on. So that I'm not sure about, but I remember this game being decent, but pretty hard. Moving on to the Ds, we've got probably one of the most unique things in the collection. This is Daisen Raikyu Exceed 7, Modern Military Tactics. This is a extremely archaic, grid-based strategy game. I'll, fully admit I never could get into this, but it was something I picked up. This was one of the later 2000, let me see what year this is. 2007, so this is really stretching into the PlayStation 3 era. It's just an extremely quirky title that came out late in the PlayStation 2's life cycle. Drakengard. This, I think, is a Squaresoft game. Yeah, Square Enix. I think it's kind of like a Panzer Dragoon kind of RPG. I don't know if it's very well regarded or how popular this was, but it's part of the collection. Dragon Quest VIII. This is in the running for probably my favorite game of all time. This game is phenomenal. It's a very old school kind of RPG, very classic, where you have just a small party, you have very limited choices in the thing, so, people who are RPG purists would probably like this. People who are used to the more modern kind of out there RPGs would find this very boring and archaic, but the art style is really nice. It's well voice acted. It's I don't know how rare it is, but it's uncommon, I think. And you can see they tried to hype it here by saying it comes with a playable demo for Final Fantasy XII. So for people who were not into the Dragon Quest series or Dragon Warrior as much, maybe they would have picked it up because of the Final Fantasy sticker on the box. But this is a phenomenal game by itself. We've got Devil May Cry. I had both Devil May Cry 3 by itself as a greatest hits, and then I also had this triple collection, which included all 3 of them. These games are not bad. I mean, they're just, arcadey third person. We've got most of the Dynasty Warrior games that came out on PlayStation 2. Missing the first Dynasty Warriors 2 and 3. Those were the first 2 that kind of established what Dynasty Warriors was going to be. The first game was 3D fighting game that was a PlayStation only, but the other games are third-person beat-em-ups. So I have Dynasty Warrior 4, Dynasty Warriors 4 Empires, Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends, which is an expansion pack with additional maps and weapons, and then Dynasty Warriors 5, Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires, Dynasty Warriors 5 Extreme Legends. So these are basically, if you like that kind of game, you'll play these for hours and hours. If you don't, you're going to be extremely bored. So that should be it for the Ds. Moving on to the Fs, we've got Fatal Fury Battle Archives 1, which is Fatal Fury 1 and 2, Fatal Fury Special, and Fatal Fury 3. These are Neo Geo ports. We've got Fatal Fury Battle Archives 2, which is Real Bout Fatal Fury, Real Bout Fatal Fury 2, and Real Bout Special. These do not include Garu Mark of the Wolves, which was the later Fatal Fury game that was really, really good. I don't think it's on either of these collections, which is a shame. We have FIFA Soccer 07. This is the only sports game I have, basically, in the whole collection. I think I bought this after watching a number of 2006 World Cup games. Bought this, realized I'm not a big fan of sports games, probably never really played it. We got Fire Pro Wrestling Returns. This is a quirky 2D series of, arcadey wrestling games that were basically Japanese exclusive, except for to the best of my knowledge, the only 2 that came out in the States were this one on PlayStation 2, and then there was a Game Boy Advance game. I don't think this has ever come out on any other system in the States. If you like this kind of game, it's a lot of fun. It's not really a sports kind of American wrestling game. It's more technical. It's almost like a fighting game in the level of depth. But this is interesting. We've got Warhammer 40,000 Fire Warrior. This is a first-person shooter that takes place in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It's not bad. It's okay. Nothing spectacular. Final Fantasy X. I could not get into this game. I know there's a lot of people that worship the newer Final Fantasies, but I just find them very boring and derivative. I think it's emphasizing style over substance. I have Final Fantasy XII. I think I bought this when it came out. I never played it, to be completely honest. And Front Mission 4. Front Mission series is, it's one of Square Enix's turn-based kind of mech strategy games. I would never really got too far into this, but, it's kind of a neat thing to have in part of the collection. Moving on to the second stack, we have the G's. We've got God of War 1. I came into this series kind of after it had been out for a little while, so that's why I've got the red label, greatest hits. I don't know what there is too much to say about the God of War games. I mean, if you like that kind of 3D, third-person, hack and slash kind of game like that, you will definitely like this. If you don't, you'll probably will not understand why people like these. So I have God of War 1 and God of War 2. Obviously, I like the first one quite a bit. God of War 2 I think I played quite a bit when it first came out, but I don't think it was as memorable as the first one. It wasn't as groundbreaking. It's just kind of more of the same, which is what you get when you get a sequel. Next we have Gradius V or Gradius 5. Either way works. This is a phenomenal shooter that is only on PlayStation 2. I don't think this ever got an arcade release. I'm a huge fan of the Gradius series. This is definitely one of the best. Interestingly, it was not done by Konami. I believe this was done by Treasure, who was a Japanese developer who made quite a number of shoot-'em-ups. The only omission in this game, I should say, is there's no Moai level. All the Gradius games have the level of the game where there's the Easter Island heads, called Moai. This, for whatever reason, does not have it. It's got everything else. It's got, everything else that you would have in a Gradius game except for that one Moai stage. So, whatever, that was an omission, but it's still a great game. We have Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. This is the first Gran Turismo game that came out on PlayStation 2. Gran Turismo is epic, basically. If you like cars, car customization, racing, simulation level kind of racing experience, these games are pretty good. I have that and Gran Turismo 4. More of the same, more cars, more tracks, everything like that. We have Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. This is kind of a collection, I think, of the PSP Grand Theft Auto game. I don't know. I don't think I got too far into this one. Gun Griffin Blaze, which is one of the final working designs titles. This, I don't remember anything too remarkable being about this. I think it's just it's a mech first-person shoot-'em-up kind of game. But it is, known as being one of the final working designs titles. Got Guilty Gear Izuka, which is a 4-player simultaneous Guilty Gear game. I think that's what this one is. I'm not sure how this actually fits into the rest of the Guilty Gear series. I just remember that it had that strange dynamic of, 2-player cooperative, 4-player competitive. I don't know where it fits in between the rest of the ones, but it's okay. We have Guilty Gear X2. This is, I think, the first one that came out on the PlayStation generation, PlayStation 2. This is very strong, very well animated 2D fighting game. They kind of took the reins from Capcom when Capcom stopped making them and moved into the 3D arena. This developer Arc System Works, published by Sammy Studios, they kind of cornered the market on 2D fighting games. That's arguable, but they definitely have their fans. We have one of the later ones, the Guilty Gear XX. We have Guilty Gear XX Accent Core. It's basically more of the same. Next, we've got the Guitar Hero games. I have the guitars and the packages. Those are in a different place in my house. I probably can skip over these if you are, if you know anything about the Guitar Hero games. Basically, it's all the same. They're rhythm games. You strum the digital guitar in time with the music. There's a different selection of both classic hits, modern music, everything like that. So I'll just cover these quickly. We've got Guitar Hero 1, Guitar Hero 2, Guitar Hero 3, the expansion that was called Encore Rocks the 80s, and then I have Guitar Hero Metallica, Guitar Hero Van Halen. These are all unopened. These I got at a clearance on Newegg.com when they were selling them all for $5. We've got Guitar Hero World Tour, which was really Guitar Hero 4, and Guitar Hero 5, and Guitar Hero Smash Hits, which is a mix of a bunch of the games a bunch of the songs that were on the previous Guitar Hero games on PlayStation 2. Next up, we have Ico, this game is very, very well regarded. This is a third-person adventure exploration game where you basically have to escort this helpless character around on this very fantasy world where you're not really sure what's going on until you get further and further into the game, but this game is pretty darn good. We've got the original Katamari Damacy, which is one of those quirky Japanese games that you'd never think would ever come out in the States, and it did. This is a kind of a puzzle, kind of a adventure game, and it's also timed. So basically you have a limited amount of time to roll this ball around a city and pick things up. It's about as quirky Japanese as you can get, and the series kind of took off in the States. So this is the original one. We have Killer 7, which is published by Capcom. I think it's by a company called Grasshopper Manufacture. It's very, very strange, very, very bizarre Japanese. It's almost, I think it's a rail shooter with some RPG exploration elements. The developer, the lead designer on this is this guy whose nickname is Suda51. If you want to read some interesting things on the internet, look up stuff about him. He's kind of an interesting character. So this game is very quirky. I was not a huge fan of it, but I guess I understand why people like this kind of game or this series. But see also some of the other titles he's done. We've got some of the King of Fighters games. We've got KOF Maximum Impact. This is a 3D King of Fighters game that I'm not sure which developer did it. It's just listed as SNK Playmore, but I think they had another company do the actual development on this. We've got King of Fighter 00 and King of Fighter 01. These are straight up 2D King of Fighters ports of the Neo Geo. We've got King of Fighters 2002 and 2003. These are the last two that were done under the old SNK regime, I believe. Then after that, I think they had sold the company to a Korean developer called SNK Playmore, or they merged into a new company. This is 2002 and 2003. We have King of Fighters 2006. I do not believe that there is an 04 or 05 edition. But yeah, it's more of the same. I think this is actually a 3D game, and then later ones in the series were 2D. So I think this is kind of a strange one in the series. And then I think the next one in the series, they changed the name, and it just became King of Fighters 11. They stopped releasing them on the yearly schedule, and then this is back to the Neo Geo 2D graphic style. And if you played any Neo Geo games, they have very unique color palettes and animation types, so you'll definitely recognize what you got there. Okay, the rest of the collection is sporadically alphabetized. It's kind of the rest of the alphabet. So we'll just go through and see what we got here. We have Odin Sphere. This is a really cool game. This is a 2D platformer style. It's kind of an action-adventure RPG with these very, very, very detailed 2D graphics. The same developer has made some other titles. There was a game called Muramasa the Demon Blade, which I think was a Nintendo Wii title, and then they also recently have Dragon's Crown on PlayStation 3, and they all have these very unique highly detailed 2D fantasy drawings, and it's not very anime-like. I mean, the cover looks like it's an anime game, but the graphics are extremely detailed, almost like Dungeons and Dragons kind of artwork that you would see in a player's handbook from years and years back. So that game's not bad. We've got Samurai Warriors and Samurai Warriors Extreme Legends. These are offshoots of the Dynasty Warriors series. It's more of the same. It just takes place in a Japanese feudal Japan history, as opposed to the Dynasty Warriors games, which take place in the Three Kingdoms era of China. We've got Lumines Plus. This, I think, was a PSP game that they then ported to PlayStation 2. It's a puzzle game. It's basically matching colors, and there's a music element to it as well. It's kind of quirky, kind of neat. We've got Taito Legends. Taito is up there with, as a classic Japanese developer that doesn't really put out a whole heck of a lot. I'm not even sure if they're still in business, but there's quite a bit of classics that are on here. You've got all the Bubble Bobble games, Jungle Hunt, Kicks, Space Invaders. I mean, they were legendary at the time. I don't know how much they actually still put out these days. Then we've also got Taito Legends 2. I somehow ended up with 2 copies of this. This has some other titles from the company. Let's see if I can focus that a little bit. They also did Darius, Legend of Kage, and Rastan. Lots of classic arcade games that, this company, I don't think how much they still put out, but, it's kind of neat. It's good that they're still putting these things out in these classic packaging. Tekken 4, we've got all the Tekken games. This one I don't remember being too memorable. Tekken 5 is not bad. This is the PlayStation 2 version. When the PlayStation 3 came out, they released a download-only title that was the expansion to this that I believe is called Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection. I have that as a download title. This is the King of Fighters bonus disc. We've got the Metal Slug Anthology. This is, I believe, Metal Slugs 1 through 6 and Metal Slug X. And Metal Slug 6 was on this collection for the first time, it says here. Available for the first time, but I think it was also released limited in Japan as a Neo Geo MVS title. We've got Time Crisis Crisis Zone. I have this with the GunCon guns. They're just in a different location. We've got Tokyo Extreme Racer Drift. I had a bunch of friends that were really into the Tokyo Extreme Racer series on Dreamcast. I believe this is the only one that came out on PlayStation 2. I never really had any Dreamcast stuff, so I had this on PlayStation 2 so I could play. We've got Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I received this as a gift. I'll be honest, I never played it. We've got Tekken Tag Tournament, the Greatest Hits Edition. This is kind of, I think, takes place between Tekken 3 and Tekken 4. This was the first Tekken game that came out on PlayStation 2, and it's got the tag mechanic. It's not bad. It's kind of a different fighting style than the regular games when you have a character that you can tag in and out with. We've got The Nightmare of Druraga, Fushigino Dungeon. This is inexplicable a sequel to The Nightmare of Druraga, I think it was. Or no, The Tower of Druraga, which was an old Namco arcade game. I think this is a series that was published in Japan for years and years and years, and this is the only one that was localized and brought to the States. So this is, I've never seen anyone that has ever heard of this game, but I picked it up and have it as part of the collection. Let's see what else we have here. We've got Samurai Warriors 2 Empires, which probably means the other Samurai Warriors games are around here someplace. We've got, Samurai Warriors 2 and Extreme Legends. More of the same. If you like that kind of game, you'll love those. If you won't, you'll probably wonder why I'm bought them. We've got, let's see what else we got here. Phantom Brave. This is the only Nippon Ichi software game, NIS America, that I have. All these games are basically like the Final Fantasy Tactics style of game, but on crack. I mean, the fighting systems in these and how it determines who's going to win the matches are just bonkers, and there's so much customization you can do in these games that it makes it almost inaccessible to someone who's not a hardcore RPG fanatic. Got Ace Combat 5. This is the only game in the series that I have. I mean, these games have their fans. Other people just probably would look past it because it's a airplane game. This isn't bad. We've got Raiden 3. This is shoot 'em up, 2D, very classic. This isn't the style of bullet hell. This is more of a classic shooter. There was a Raiden collection that came out on PlayStation 1 that was a big box title. I have that as a digital download on the PlayStation 3. I think that disc is fairly obscure because it was a really early release and it was never reprinted. So this is Raiden 3, The Legendary Shooter Returns. So this game is probably fairly uncommon. I don't even remember where I tracked this down, but it's out there. We've got Silent Hill 2. This copy is kind of beat up. I tried to track this down. I've been trying to find a Greatest Hits edition, but I just don't want to pay what they charge for it on Amazon. This is probably arguably the best game in the Silent Hill series. This copy is, it was a used copy from a GameStop or something. The disc is pretty scratched up. I don't even think I was able to beat it because it kept locking up so much. So on my long-term to-do list is to find a red label version of Silent Hill 2 which has the additional content, and then get one new, hopefully for an inexpensive price, and then play through it. We've got Shadow of the Colossus. This is by the same developer as Ico. This is a phenomenal game. It is kind of like a 3D Legend of Zelda game. There's almost nothing on the screen. There's no health bar. There's no items. You basically go into the world and you track down one of these giant monsters, and then you figure out how to defeat it. This game is, phenomenal. That's all I can say about it. We've got Wipeout Fusion, which is the only Wipeout game that came out on the PlayStation 2. This is nothing special. They changed the basic Wipeout style of racing, and I don't think they made it any better moving to what they did. It doesn't have the same kind of feeling of speed as the other Wipeout titles do. We've got the Sega Genesis collection. What else can you say about Sega Genesis? It's lots and lots of Sega Genesis games, 28. It's got all the classics, but obviously there's a lot of omissions. I think it's mostly first-party games. Games that were developed by Sega. I think there's a handful of other ones that are other developers, and it's got some interesting things like Kid Chameleon is a esoteric kind of Sega Genesis game, but this is not bad. Resident Evil 4, other than Resident Evil 2, this is probably one of the better ones in the series. I think a lot of people are big fans of this game. This is a lot of fun. This launched, I think, as a GameCube exclusive, and then after Nintendo didn't sell a heck of a lot of GameCubes, they ported this to PlayStation 2, and I think it came out on the Dreamcast as well. This is the first Resident Evil game that was very different. It was almost like an action kind of adventure game as opposed to the classic Resident Evil style. So I think it missed some of the fans of the old school Resident Evil, but I think it's a better game as a result. All right, moving right along, we have a collection of some of the Resident Evil games. This has Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Code Veronica X, which is the re-release of the PlayStation 2 version of the game, and then we have Resident Evil Outbreak. We also have a Metal Gear Solid collection, which is Metal Gear Solid 1, which is, to my knowledge, this is the only PlayStation game that comes in a PlayStation 2 box. We also have Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, and I believe these are the full versions, the re-release versions, because I think they patched those basically and resold the games with different names to basically fix some camera issues, especially with with Metal Gear Solid 3. So I believe that's what's in this collection. We have Sylphied, which is up there with Gun Griffin Blaze as being one of the final Working Designs titles. This is a shoot 'em up. That's kind of what Working Designs did. They took very quirky Japanese games that were limited appeal in the States, and they basically went, full on and released these in special editions. And this kind of has a reflective rainbow kind of cover. They did a very, very good job with what they were doing, but I think they published a lot of stuff that was so niche that they, couldn't stay in business. I think the final game they had coming out was a RPG called Growlancer, which I think if you read up on Wikipedia, the issues that they had publishing that game, you'll find out why they are not in business anymore. But luckily, the key people managed to start other companies and stay in the industry. We have Virtual Fighter 4 Evolution. This is another game I somehow ended up with 2 copies of. Virtual Fighter is one of those fighting games where you either love it or hate it. I'm kind of indifferent about it. We've got another copy of Silent Hill 2. This one I did get new, so this is better than the other one I had, which was a used one. I think I forgot that I actually had this, so maybe I'll go through and try to play this again. We've got the Sega Classics Collection. This is different than the Genesis Collection. This is a collection of Sega arcade games, and how many are on here? I think there's probably 10 or 12. And it's got obviously some extremely obscure ones that you would never even know about, like Tant R, what the heck is that? Bonanza Brothers, and it's got some other classics here, Fantasy Zone, Golden Axe, Space Harrier, but this is a collection of Sega arcade games. We have Ridge Racer 5. It's it's another Ridge Racer game. If you like these, you'll love it. Puzzle Quest, as I said in one of the other videos, this is a series that I have multiple copies of this game. I also have it on the PC through Steam. It's a neat color matching game that has RPG elements. We've got Romance of the Three Kingdoms X, or Romance of the Three Kingdoms 10. This is the only game in that series I have. I can see why that not a lot of people buy these. This is very inaccessible unless you're extremely into detailed strategy RPGs. I was not able to get into this game at all, but how can you have a collection without even owning at least one of these games? We'll start over here. We've got Soul Calibur 3. Soul Calibur games are fun. It's a kind of a quirky fighting game that has unique rules. It's weapon-based combat. I think I have Soul Calibur 2 here as well. Soul Calibur 2, this is the PlayStation version, so of course it has Hayachi from the Tekken games. The other versions of this on both Xbox One, or I should say the original Xbox, and the GameCube had guest characters from those. I think the GameCube one had Link from Legend of Zelda, and then the Xbox One had Spawn, the cartoon character, for some bizarre reason. We've got SNK Arcade Classics 1. This, I think, is a mix of some Neo Geo games, and then I think it is all Neo Geo games. What else is on here? Metal Slug, Sengoku. Okay, so this is all Neo Geo games. It just doesn't have the Neo Geo name on it, but no, right there at the top. I'm an idiot. Okay, yeah, so this is a handful of, it's kind of a mix of, it's not just Metal Slug, it's not just Art of Fighting and Fatal Fury, it's a mix of all the other games. I hope it has Magician Lord on it, because that game was cool. Yep, it's on there, so. We have more SNK stuff, World Heroes Anthology. This is another one of the Neo Geo fighting series. This is World Heroes 1, 2, 2-Jet, and World Heroes Perfect. Capcom Fighting Evolution. This is one of their last attempts at making a 2D game. It's got characters from a bunch of the different franchises, including Red Earth, which I don't think was ever released in the States. I don't remember being too pleased with this. I think it was kind of missed the mark after Street Fighter 3 was pretty perfect. I don't remember too much about this game, but I don't think it was that great. We got Neo Geo Battle Coliseum, which is basically SNK's version of a mix of all the different characters from different fighting games, but it's not King of Fighters. It is characters from all different SNK games. I think it's even got some characters from Metal Slug, as much as you can believe that. So you got a little guy there with Metal Slug doing summoning one of the Metal Slug tanks. I have to go through and maybe give this another try. We got Street Fighter Alpha Anthology. This is a collection of, what is on here? Street Fighter Alpha, Alpha 2, Alpha 2 Gold, and Street Fighter Alpha 3. And then it's also got one of their puzzle games, Super Gem Fighter. The Street Fighter Alpha series was not bad. It was kind of a nice bridge between Street Fighter 2 and what later became Street Fighter 3, which is a very technical fighter. We've got Street Fighter Anniversary Collection, which is basically the best games that they had. You know, Street Fighter 2 Hyper, which is kind of a fixed, patched version of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. And then we've also got Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which was the pinnacle of that series. And what else does this say? A thing for the animated series. We got Rogue Galaxy, which I did not get into. I should give this game a try. I was reading a little bit about it on the internet. This is by Level 5, who went on to make Dragon Quest VIII, and they also make the Professor Layton series. This is a RPG that is a outer space RPG, which is kind of, you know, unique. I should definitely put this on my to-do list and dig out the PlayStation 2 and give that game a try. We have Neo Contra. This game is a blast. This is a return to the Super Nintendo style of Contra, where you have a mix of 2D side-scrolling and 2D top-scrolling missions, and that's how the Super Nintendo Contra game, which I think was called Super Contra. This is that style, and it's got this Western-style comic book art, which is kind of neat. We have Valkyrie Profile 2. This is a sequel to an extremely rare PlayStation 1 game, which a friend of mine had, that was a 2D RPG that was a side-scroller. I think I bought this based on the name only. I don't think I ever went through and played it, so I should probably fire this up sometime and see if it's any good. We've got Siren, which was... what developer was this? I think this was published first party by Sony. This is, you know, horror kind of Silent Hill-ish kind of game. I think they also had one on PlayStation 3 that was released in episodes, but I never picked that one up. Stretch Panic. This is a weird freaking game. This is by Treasure, who became well known as putting out a number of shoot-'em-up games. This is a bizarre 3D kind of way out there kind of game. I don't even know when I picked this up, but this is very strange. You're this cartoony character with this demonic hand that you run around and kind of punch things and pull things. It's very strange, but you know, it's unique. It's definitely unique. I have an unopened copy of Space Channel 5 Special Edition. I've never really got into this. I think this was something I picked up when Circuit City or something was going out of business. I never opened it. I was never into those games, but you know, it's just kind of a neat thing to have in the collection, I guess. R-Type Final. This is a lot of fun. This is a standard side-scrolling shoot-'em-up in the R-Type tradition. It has some unique rules. I remember there's a stage that, depending on how you beat the boss, the next time you fight the stage, it's completely different. This is very difficult. The R-Type games always had a challenging difficulty, and this has I think there's 100 ships you can unlock if you fulfill different parameters of the missions. I don't think how many I got, maybe 50 or 60 of them, but there's a lot of ones that's basically play through the game without getting hit, you know, and beat it, and you'll unlock one ship. We have Okami, which is, I think it originally shipped on the PlayStation 2, and then it later became a Wii title. This is very steeped in Japanese mythological tradition. You control the sun god in the form of a wolf. It's kind of like a 3D Legend of Zelda type of exploration game. It's kind of neat. Alright, we're reaching the end of the pile here. We've got Midway Arcade Treasures 1 and 2 and 3, which are collections of arcade games. It's basically the best of the best from one of the better American developers. These have a mix of all kinds of crazy stuff. You know, you got Gauntlet, the Mortal Kombat series, spanning almost their entire catalog. We got a Namco Museum 50th Anniversary. This is another one of the arcade collections of the company that made a lot of things, Galaga, Galaxian, the Pac-Man series, and then there's some obscure ones in here too, like Bosconian, Rolling Thunder. This is a lot of fun. We got Beautiful Joe. This is a quirky platformer with the ability to stop time. I never really got too much into it, but it was highly rated at the time. Guess it's just not my kind of game, though. We've got Transformers. This is not one of the better ones that came out on PlayStation 3. This is kind of, you know, just I think it's just a 3D kind of punch, you know, run around and punch things. There's only 3 characters. Power up 40 weapons. Yeah, there was nothing too spectacular about this. I just basically picked it up because it was a Transformers game. We have We Heart Katamari, which is one of the later Katamari Damacy games. I don't think I got too far into this one, but it's, you know, it's more of the same. We're down to the last 5. We've got one that's a repeat here. We've got Metal Gear Solid 3. We've got Silent Hill 3, which is one of the later games in the series. I don't have Silent Hill 4 because I read someplace that it's not by the same developers, and I don't think any of the other recent Silent Hill games are by Konami in-house. This one I think is love it or hate it. Got Beautiful Joe 2. Tourist Trophy, which is basically from the makers of Gran Turismo. It's Gran Turismo Motorcycles, and they never made a sequel to this. It's rarer, I think, than any of the Gran Turismo games. It has a lot of the same tracks. They never made a sequel. They never put motorcycles in any of the subsequent Gran Turismo games, so this is kind of just a unique footnote. I don't even think a lot of people have heard about this. And then the last game in the collection here is the Red Star, which was... There's kind of an interesting history behind this game. It was scheduled to be published, but the publisher, which was Acclaim, went out of business in the mid-2000s. So a couple years later, a different developer and a publisher picked up the rights and finished the game and then released it. This was based on a comic book series from the mid-2000s. This is kind of a mix of a Final Fight style hack and slash beat 'em up with a bullet hell shooter elements for the boss fights. So this is pretty interesting. So that's about it for the collection, and it's extensive, so hopefully this video doesn't end up being too long, but if it is, I'll split it into multiple parts. So leave a comment, any questions, anything you got. Thanks for watching.